Hello, I'm Matt Kelly.
And I'm Matt Dancona.
And this is the Two Matts for the week ending Friday, the 22nd of March. The podcast that says, never meet your heroes. What did we talk about, mate?
Well, we talked about Rachel Reeves and a very important lecture she gave this week about Labour's plans. And I think I'm glad we did because, you know, in spite of all the
It's not as boring as it sounds, folks.
It really is. It's quite. It's probably going to matter to all of us quite a lot quite soon.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think if it's passed you by, or you sort of saw it on the news and you thought, oh, I can't be bothered working out what that all means. We've done a bit of the working out. We've tried to
deconstruct it into political and social reality, and it's fascinating actually.
And in the second half, we have a lot more fun.
Talking about heroes we have met, those we've liked, those we haven't. And there's a sort of a rogues gallery ranging from Steve Harley to Salman Rushdie.
Yeah, we spill some proper beans on some proper celebrities we've encountered.
The beans they out the can.
Yeah, so that's all worth listening to, I hope. Anyway, this is the Two Matts, episode 37. Enjoy. So, Matt, not every week we pick apart a massive, big policy speech. But
no, we don't.
This one is worth doing, isn't it?
I think it is, because it's funny, you know, the political news agenda has been dominated by Tory deck chair on the Titanic movements.
Yeah.
And sort of, is Penny Mordaunt the right person to take over from Rishi Sunak or Tom Tugendhat? And I think there's a kind of danger in the media at the moment that the death of the Tory empire, which is a good subject, becomes the only subject, and people forget that in all probability, or more likely than not, there will be a Labour government by the end of the year. And that's why I was really glad we had Tom Baldwin on a couple of weeks to talk about, you know,
loads of good feedback about that.
He was really
quite a few people thought we were a bit fawning of Starmer in general. So,
well, you know, I think I think we haven't been, and I don't think we'll be today. Actually, is my hunch. But you know, the thing you refer to is Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, delivered the very prestigious Mays lecture on Tuesday this week. And for those who don't know, and there's no reason why you should, the Mays lecture's an annual lecture given at the Bayes Business School. It's been going since 1978, at which leading financial figures, often chancellors or shadow chancellors, set out what they believe in and intend to do. And I think maybe the best way sort of getting us into the subject is for producer Matt to give us a blast of Rachel Reeves and what she had to say. This was towards the end of the speech.
We must face the world as it is, not as we would have it be. I am under no illusions about the scale of the challenge, nor the stakes. The consequences, should we fail to learn the lessons of our recent past, are severe. For our place in the world, our living standards, our climate commitments, and faith in democratic politics itself. But I remain an optimist about our ability to rise to the challenges we face. If we can bring together public and private sectors in a national mission directed at restoring strong economic growth across Britain, when we speak of a decade of national renewal, this is what we mean.
So that's Rachel Reeves, and you know, the standout phrase is "we stand at an inflection point," which was quickly picked up and not denied as being an allusion to the birth of Thatcherism in 1979. And of course that invited comparison between the Thatcher government and the prospective Keir Starmer government and the scale of its ambitions. And I mean, for background, it's not the first time that Starmer's Labour has done this. So Starmer himself did an article for the Daily Telegraph in December in which he celebrated what he called moments of meaningful change. And one of them was the way in which Thatcher had, he said, sought to drag Britain out of its stupor by setting loose our natural entrepreneurialism. And I gather that in this week's Politico Power Play podcast, David Lammy's at it, Shadow Foreign Secretary, talking about Thatcher as a visionary leader for the UK.
I mean, to people of my generation, for just turned 55, grew up in Liverpool. I mean, Thatcher, to hear anybody to hear a Labour politician describing Thatcher in kind of glowing terms still feels really, really weird.
It risks a confusion which has in fact ensued as a consequence of Rachel Reeves's latest use of this. And I think it's because people think that what politicians are saying is that they themselves are Thatcherite, whereas what they really mean is that they are Thatcheresque.
They're agents of grand change.
They are proposing to emulate either her style of leadership, which is what Blair did, or a big ambition for the country. And you're right, though. I mean, it's a high risk tactic because the mere mention of Thatcher is, to say the least, still triggering.
I mean, not to get too diverted on this because it's not really that relevant. But do you think there's something in there about this idea of appeasing the red wall a bit more, that they're bigging up the Thatch and giving some succor to Lee Anderson's voters and stuff like this? I
think the problem is, and I mean, I have mixed feelings about this, but I think that Thatcher is sort of remains, 30, almost 35 years after she stopped being Prime Minister, the kind of maypole around which British politics dances. Yeah. And I think there's a sort of, I understand why people do it, and I think you're right that maybe it's meant to be a sort of a Thatch whistle too, a certain kind of working class Thatcher voter from the 80s. I don't know, or that kind of thing. But there are risks in endlessly invoking past politicians. I mean, Attlee didn't say, "I'm going to be like Asquith me," and Thatcher didn't say, Harold Macmillan, that's a bit of me. That is.
I mean, interestingly, one thing she does talk about in this speech, which I should say, it's worth reading the speech.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely worth reading.
I mean, it's probably worth reading it more than it is listening to it. I certainly found reading it, I absorbed more of it, and it's very well written. I found it really
dense,
coherent. It's full of ideas, and it's full of kind of macro historic explanations about how we got into this mess, and some of which we will unpick in this podcast, and what it means for all of our futures, which is fascinating. So, but I did find that interesting that she's spurns Blairism quite thoroughly.
Yes. I mean, there's clearly an attempt to distance. I mean, Starmer as well, I think, and she are trying to use this time as we all kind of wait in agony for the for the election,
isn't it agony?
And it is agony. To say we are not just New Labour 2.0. And I think that is worth saying, because I think that there is a risk that people will, I'm sure the Tories will just say it's back to 2010, well,
if only.
But that being polite about New Labour but marking yourself out as different is just sound sense, because the world is totally different since 2010. So that's kind of, that I thought was
and it might
wise.
Be worth just picking up, because this is one of the key themes, isn't it, about how the world is different, and she's effectively saying that globalization is dead.
Exactly. That is the big. And she said this at the Labour conference, but I'm glad she's saying it again, because she fleshes it out. And she's not saying, by the way, that we should all move back to protectionism. She's not sort of a Trump figure. But what she is saying is that we've found that the world of globalization is much more full of risk and subject to disruption.
It's fragile, much more fragile.
And it's time to lose the kind of slightly starry-eyed approach to globalization that was very much the orthodoxy, across the political spectrum after the end of the Cold War. And I think this is just good sense, and I think she's right. COVID, supply chains, Ukraine, Gaza, the Houthis in the Red Sea, all of this is just showing us that the idea that globalization is a kind of panacea is wrong. And I think she's also right that we need to be much, much, much more clear-eyed about the adverse consequences of globalization. And she doesn't talk about inequality very much, but when she says, she calls it the pursuit of narrow-based, narrowly shared growth, it's pretty obvious what she's talking about. And I thought that's a big tick, And she also, I think, she approached we've talked a lot on the podcast about the fact that we are, the 21st century is going to be an era of more government. And she said, we are already stumbling blindfolded into an era of the bigger state. So, and now I'm paraphrasing, the point is to make that bigger state well designed and well, targeted. And I think that's great. And a whole list of things I liked. I mean, I was very pleased that she talked about, because in these speeches, chancellors and shadow chancellors tend to be very, very excited and, understandably, about life sciences and tech and, what she calls frontier sectors, I think. But it's good to see. She also said she got businesses at the frontier, but she said she also wanted to concentrate on what she called the everyday economy of retail, care, transport, delivery, utilities. I'd add in the public sector, that most people don't work for a gene science company.
That's right, yeah.
And their pay and their selfhood and their sense of belonging and being part of society is just as important. And I think that, in a way, the most admirable thing about the speech was this sense that, and this was, I think, explicitly critical of the Blair era, was that you cannot ignore the fact that an economy is embedded in a society and it, has massive responsibilities to it and consequences for it.
And she says specifically, when fiscal policy diverges from what's happening in the real world, in people's real experiences, that's where you get this sense of angst and unhappiness and division that leads to populists rising up not with answers, as she said, but with recriminations. And we've seen that over the last decade. Recriminations trumping answers.
So I think one has to give her, at minimum, a kind of big tick on this as an interim statement. Yeah. The questions that arose from it, though, are big. And there's no point in disguising that. The diagnosis, as we've said, was good, and there's a lot there. And
we haven't mentioned the tag she's given the whole thing yet, which is
securonomics,
which kind of frames the whole conversation.
Well, this is her idea that we need to think more about security in all of its forms. Ranging from defence to
job security,
and the personal security of the vulnerable, and so on. And I think that's absolutely spot on. However, that leads on to one of the problems, which is that securonomics is very influenced by what's happening in the States with Biden. And this was very aptly described in a couple of places as the speech as Bidenomics without the money. Yeah. Because the fact is that if you look at Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which in a normal world would be enough to win him the forthcoming presidential election, 290 billion quid is spent on it. Labour has, and that's just the subsidies for green industries. Labour has already stepped back from its much more modest promise to spend 28 billion a year on green policies. So it's a good pursuit, but if she's, as she says, intent on causing stability, generating stability and reasonably fast rates of return, then that was a big U-turn to my mind, and remains one.
And what worried me about it, the premise seems to be, well, we haven't got the money, and we haven't got and then there is a bunch of recriminations within her speech. We haven't got the money because Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng blew it. And when you see the figures,
they're amazing, aren't they?
When you see them as starkly presented as she presents them, just before the mini budget, the net interest debt of this nation's debts was going to cost something like 29 billion. Since the massive interest rate hike, it's now 82 billion we've got to pay. So there's 53 billion gone out of your pocket in a speech. Well done, Liz Truss. Keep your head out of my face, please, for the rest of my life. Right. But so there's all this recrimination about the last 14 years. But there's a reliance, I think, in the speech that's coming through, too great reliance on private enterprise and business to be the investor and the partner. And she talks about, not wanting a crude central government direction. And then in the same breath, she talks about the progress of China, where you have got a crude central government direction and very effectively so, So I am a bit worried that
it's not clear, is it?
Yeah.
And, I mean,
you mentioned the famous Boris quote, which was the business, which is the other end of the spectrum, and I think possibly there's somewhere in the middle.
I mean, to go back to Biden, one of the this isn't obviously there's no analog because we have the NHS here rather than the very strange hybrid health system they have in the States. But, Biden has got a lot of mileage out of standing up to big pharma. And I think that since the crash, there's been a general reluctance of, if you like, the moderate left to do what I think has to be done, which is to say, look, we will create an environment where you can grow business, but the days where we came and sort of bowed at your feet are gone. Yeah. And they should be gone. Because, if you believe in social responsibility for companies, it's not working. Yeah. If you believe companies have a duty to deliver greenery, it's not working.
Yeah. Or even, never mind a duty, a sort of sense of mutual benefit with society.
Yes.
It's not happening.
And I think that at the risk of using the P word, I'm going to use it. I think that Starmer's Labour could afford to be a little bit populist about this, actually.
Right.
And actually say, we are hospitable to business, but we're not in business's pocket.
Yeah.
We do represent the many, not the few.
I thought there was some interesting tells in the speech because one of the headlines that came out, certainly, I run a business, so I've got sort of foot in two camps. And when she spoke about, employment protection from day one, he was like, my God, does that mean you take somebody on, you can't, if they turn out to be a bad fit, you can't get rid of them? And there was some mitigation for that. So there'll be a probation period as per normal and blah, blah, blah. But the reason she gave for that enhanced employment protection, I thought was really interesting. She said, how are you going to take the gamble of leaving a job in a dead-end industry? She didn't say that, but that's what she meant. And reskilling and retraining in a new sector of society, unless you know that you've got that security. And I thought that's really interesting.
It's well thought through.
She's talking about a population in transit economically, and that's what we are. And we're all going to have to face huge change. And she was saying, how can we make that change as secure as possible so people don't run from it, but kind of embrace it?
So there were all sorts of good bits in it, that being one. The bit that made me feel a bit dismal was when she said, the three big things are stability, investment and productivity. Now, all of them are good things in themselves. But the truth is that they're exactly the trio that Rishi Sunak or even Philip Hammond would have said when they were Chancellor, right? And that it felt very old, that to me. Especially to your point, Matt, that it's clear that a lot more of the investment than we initially thought is going to be private investment. And that is very hard to rely on, especially when you're trying, in America, they're running the economy hot. It's clear that Starmer's Labour, if it's elected, is not going to run the economy hot in terms of state intervention. And it's now trying to introduce lots of supply side reforms to make Britain more attractive to investment. Well, that's fine, but it takes a very long time.
Yeah, and we're not the only ones who've had that idea.
And there was someone else
for quite a while.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I felt it was a bit Quango heavy as well. So when I hear about things like the Enterprise and Growth Unit and the British Infrastructure Council and Skills England and devolving adult education budgets, I do slightly reach for my metaphorical revolver because I think, all right, but what does that really mean? I mean, talking shops can do good, but they have to be driven by a determination and a will. And just getting a bunch of business folk together in an infrastructure council is not going to. I mean, there's a lot of bits where she talks about, kind of boosterish language where she says a once in a generation overhaul of the nationally significant infrastructure regime. Well, all right, but how?
Yeah.
And skills, I mean, every single government I've covered has promised a skills revolution.
Yeah.
In order to even remotely believe in anything to do with skills now, I need to know all the details.
Yeah.
Because it's just something. I mean, do you remember Gavin Williamson with his T levels when he was Education Secretary?
Yeah.
I mean, what? All right. There's no doubt we need more skills and more flexibility with skills and greater collaboration between business and government on skills. That's all kind of screamingly obvious. What exactly are you going to do to ensure that? And do you accept, which is the corollary, that the upside of that is not going to come? They talk about a decade of renewal, Starmer's team. It won't come in a decade. A skills revolution is a 20-year
of course it is
thing, minimum.
Of course.
Minimum.
Of course.
So I'm still puzzled as to where all this growth is going to come from.
Yeah. And we're starting from such a tough position.
Yeah.
And this is worth picking up, I think. She mentions Brexit twice.
Barely.
In one paragraph. Gets it out the way, and then spends the rest of the speech, the next 7,000 words, outlining a whole range of environmental issues and circumstances that have been nothing but compounded by Brexit.
Yeah.
And she talks about, reassuringly, I thought there was one paragraph, let me see if I can find it, where she's talking about, this is not a question of retreating into Fortress Britain, she says. Indeed, success will rest on forming new bilateral and multilateral partnerships and forging a closer relationship with our neighbours in the European Union. We want to make it easier to export and import. Well, that's the bone of this, isn't it?
That really is the bone.
We fucked ourselves big time in 2016, and now we're trying to catch up.
The language is a bit weaselly, isn't it, as well? Because she talks about the bad Brexit deal that the Tories did, as if there's a good one.
Yeah, that's right.
There are better ones, that's for sure. Yeah. Like staying in the single market, which was never really a remote possibility under the Tories. But
do you think though that is there any? Obviously, it seems apparent they're never going to come out with it and say Brexit was a catastrophe, and we should now reconsider relitigating that, because that's the most expedient route to solve the problem it caused. They'll never say that because it's politically...
It's backward looking. They need to be the party of the future. They need to own the future.
Yeah.
And the inheritance they're going to get, like it or not, is infused by Brexit.
Yeah.
My hope, and it is just a hope, is that they operate a kind of show not tell approach to Europe, which is they just get busy with the kind of bilaterals you're talking about, plus a much, much, much more kind of open and fruitful relationship with Brussels. And before you know it, you have something that amounts to, for instance, in 10 years, the going back into the single market. But I think the timings on this are going to be very, very slow. It took us 12 years to go in last time. I think it will be longer this time. But I do hope that the kind of extreme caution you describe is because they just don't want the election to be Keir Starmer's going to get Brexit undone.
Yeah, because one of the key elements, let's not call it Brexit then, or rejoin or anything.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the more granular elements of it. One of the key things that would solve a lot of the economic problems, and let's frame that by saying she says that solving the economy is the job of solving society, she's saying. Well, one of the big elements would be freedom of movement.
Yes.
Again, and that would, you can maybe refine and nuance it so that it's better for our economy and better for Britain's needs than it was previously. And we all know that Blair completely underestimated the influx that would follow freedom of movement. But you could refine it, but there'd still be an essential freedom of movement. But of course, the whole narrative around freedom of movement has been so bloody poisoned by these right-wing populists in government and in, sitting around the editor's desk at the Daily Mail and so on and so forth. That's where it becomes difficult. It's difficult to do the common sense things because everybody's heads have been poisoned by the politics, the right-wing populist politics. She is now saying, if you want to beat it, you've got to adopt these measures. So what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way is there's a kind of catch-22
there is
here. They know what they want to do and they know why they can't do it.
I think one of the things that Labour, if it's elected, is going to have to do quite early on, and it's not an attractive proposition, is really run hard at the immigration issue.
Yeah.
And to give a well-resourced, compassionate reset for border control.
Yeah.
And present it as a detoxified, humane, well-funded, fast-moving system that doesn't involve small boats in Rwanda and all that kind of rubbish. And it's a nightmare because any new Tory opposition will spend every available hour saying they're going soft on immigration, they're going soft on small boats. But nonetheless, to get to the point that we want to get on, freedom of movement, there has to be some sort of evidence that, they're going to have to put down a lot of evidence of good faith on these kind of issues. I mean, this is all part of the ghastliness of the Brexit dividend, because it isn't just about how awful it's been for our politics and society and our economy. It's also sort of made all kinds of areas of policy very difficult to address. It really has, and untying that knot is going to be very hard. And that's why, although I do have, I am concerned about there being a dangerous sort of mismatch between expectations and reality in all this. The expectations that this new government, if it is elected, are going to face are crushing, and that, to be truthful, there wasn't enough in this to answer that. One of the things about Thatcher, to go back to where we started, was that she always understood the importance that her big abstract ideas had, that they needed to be matched by what you might call retail politics. They needed to be matched by council house sales and tax cuts for everyone, not just rich folk, and turning the really quite technical and in fact, in consequence, quite disastrous in some cases, privatisation of the utilities into an opportunity to have popular shareholding. Now, not those. I don't mean those policies, but where are Starmer's? Does Starmer have that doorstep heft? Does he have that? Maybe not yet, but he's going to need it. He's going to need to be able to say, as a consequence of having more than a term of Labour government, you are going to get the following. Now, that may be to do with social care. It could have to do with housing, but it's got to be stuff that people talk about at the pub.
I mean, the challenge I think they've got to accept, and maybe they do, and it's me that's being naive, and that they are more cynical than they appear. But the challenge is that they are going to have to face a lot of a lot of unhappiness from people with these policies. Because, take one example. I mean, I thought it was striking. She said that planning policy in the UK is the single biggest problem in holding our productivity back. So you can expect a whole new wave of developments and new towns, and you can expect the erosion of the green belt and all of these things. And the NIMBYs can go and go screw themselves. There will be huge swathes of new developments around. Now, that will please people eventually, but it's going to piss a lot of people off in the meantime. It will improve the economy eventually because there'll be more construction work, and as we've seen in Putin, the reason Russia's economy is doing so well, they're building tanks. So there is a sort of sense to it, but they've got to, I think, shed this idea that they can have a big extended honeymoon period in the way that Blair maybe did. They're going to annoy people, I think, quite 100%. Quickly.
And I think that if they're not extremely unpopular by the end of year one, they're doing it wrong. That if we assume, which we can't really, but let's just take it as a thought experiment, that they get a really decent majority. They should then take some very big risks in the first couple of years. They should use it. And again, you have to say that both she and Starmer, I think, are temperamentally quite hostile to that, if you like. They like reassurance. They like, they like to be seen as pragmatists. They like, and all that's good. I mean, they've turned the Labour Party around in 4 years. It's quite impressive. But once they get into office, if they get into office, they're going to have to completely change that mentality of just reassuring people. The reassurance phase has to end the minute he walks into Downing Street.
I think what they need to do is scare people. I think not. I mean, but scare them with actual truth and reality.
I think it has to be. I mean, to use her phrase, build on inflection point and say inflection points are not easy. And you know what? People do rise to that kind of rhetoric. I mean, you don't. people like Churchill and Thatcher and Lincoln and Kennedy and the great sort of public figures in terms of oratory of history, have often had the guts to say to publics, it's going to be really hard. The problem is that populism has kind of eroded that because it's based on the idea that there are simple solutions to complex problems, which is the opposite of the truth.
I think we've got to a stage now. I remember being in a business where you could see the walls closing in, and I remember the boss saying to us, we are now in Tina zone. And Tina was, there is no alternative. All of the options had gone away. Yeah. We didn't have the luxury of choice. There was one route out of this, and we had to just go for it. And as it happened, it didn't work, and that company went into administration.
Right. But
so Britain feels to me, I think the biggest challenge they've got is that there's something within our culture, and I think it stretches back not just decades but centuries. We're like the Woolworths of economies. We've enjoyed huge kind of hegemony. We've had stability, we've had growth, we've had a sense that we're here forever and nothing can go wrong and we'll never go out of business. And yet in the last 14 years we've underperformed as a nation in terms of productivity. We've been in that bottom third of OECD nations. If we'd have just hit the average, and she points this out in her speech, every household would be 5,000 quid better off, and we'd have another 100 billion in the economy to play with. But we haven't. We've underperformed, and I think we need a shock. Something needs to shock, and I don't know whether securonomics as a phrase or an 8,000 word speech is the shock. I think they've got to do a better job of telling the story.
Obviously, to be fair to her, this is not meant for doorstep consumption. No. This is for a city audience, financier audience, media discussion, right? Yeah. That's fair enough. To look at it in a kind of glass half full, we've already enumerated a whole shopping list of questions that flow from it. It's got some good stuff in it, but between now and Christ no latest bet, but you never know with this crowd. When they campaign, they can't talk like this. And I hope she never uses the phrase securonomics on
the doorstep,
or to be honest, around campaign time in a interview. Because it doesn't. It doesn't mean anything to people who are just thinking about normal stuff. What they need to know is what actually appears under the heading securonomics in terms of their lived experience in life. But she's a very, very intelligent. One thing I think we're agreed on is that she's shown herself again to be a very, very intelligent politician.
This is the massive upside, is that
it really
in Rachel Reeves, you've got somebody with a long view, an idea of what needs to change, a willingness to articulate it, albeit as we've seen in a very academic thesis like this. And clearly somebody with huge brain power. And you can say that for Starmer as well. Where I think we both agree also is that what we'd like to see is a bit more in-your-face visibility, articulation of how we're going to get out of this.
I would like a bit more populist punch. But, this I'll give them, and it's quite important, is that imagine COVID, imagine the pandemic with Reeves and Starmer taking those press conferences.
Yes.
You'd have felt a lot better, wouldn't you?
A lot more comfortable, yeah.
There wouldn't have been all the rubbish about everything being world-beating when it was actually falling to pieces. There would have been much more candour, much more urgency, much more cooperation with other countries. Now, that's not the only test, but it does that as a kind of hypothetical. It does tell you a lot about the fact that there is at least a chance now. Well, the rest, there's a lot of fire. There are many fires ablaze around the world. There is at least a chance, it seems to me, that we could be about to have a halfway decent government. And I've reached the point now where I'll take that.
No, totally.
I'll take that.
Totally. I felt a lot more positive, having read that and thought about the speech. And again, it's there on the Labour Party website. You can read it in full.
It's worth reading, isn't it?
It's definitely worth reading.
Yeah, it really is.
And it'll take you about an hour to read it and consume it and think about it properly. But I would definitely recommend it highly.
Yeah, me too. I think we'll remember it. I suspect we'll remember it one way or another.
Yeah,
as a very significant punctuation mark in the emergence of this generation of Labour.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you for that, Matt. And we'll come back and talk about Cockney Rebels.
Oh, the obvious segue. Segue. Sorry, segue. Got it wrong.
This podcast is brought to you, as ever, by the New European newspaper. And we've got a great offer for you. Do you like the New European newspaper, Matt?
Well, I like working for it, and I enjoy reading it. So it's a double thumbs up from me.
So you're already a subscriber. So this is
I actually am. Yeah.
This is of no interest to you because you'll feel like you're missing out.
No, but
it's a great offer.
I find it validating.
Okay. Well, listen, if you're not a subscriber, you really should be, because you'll be supporting fantastic independent journalism that you'll actually enjoy getting posted through your letterbox every week. And as an exclusive offer for listeners of the Two Mats podcast, we've got free signed copies of James O'Brien's hardback book, which is a brilliant book, isn't it?
Great book. The book.
How They Broke Britain, and that's worth 20 quid. And you can get that by subscribing for as little as £1 a week for all of our digital stuff. But if, like me, you love getting your hands on a physical newspaper every single week, you can get that delivered to your door for just an extra £1 a week, and that's a saving of around 80% on the cost of what you'd pay at the newsstand. So please do the right thing. Subscribe to the New European. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. That's the number 2, MATTS, and tell them we sent you.
So, retrospectors, what historical events are we ticking off on this week's run of Today in History?
Well, Monday is the anniversary of the day a Japanese inventor helped blind people cross the street.
Then on Tuesday, we tell the epic tale of Barcelona's La Sagrada Familia.
On Wednesday, the day the French blamed the Black Death on astrology.
Thursday was the day the last prisoners left Alcatraz.
And on Friday, we revisit the opening of SeaWorld. But where's baby Shamu?
We discuss this and more on Today in History with the Retrospectors. 10 minutes every weekday, wherever you get your podcasts.
So, Steve Harley.
Yes, a figure from our youth.
Died, didn't he?
He did die. He died. He died on. I think he was. Did he die on Sunday? He died on Sunday from cancer,
which is very sad.
Obviously. It is very sad, and we're both of an age where Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel were part of our sort of, I guess, part of our kind of emergence as the sort of centrist rockers that we are today.
So the reason I thought it would be quite good to talk about Steve Harley, God rest his soul, is that we could do a piece about what happens when you meet your heroes, because he was a hero and I did indeed meet him, and I never.
By the way, anyone who doesn't know who Steve Harley is, you do, because you've heard songs like "Make Me Smile" a million times, but you may not know who he is. But he really is.
Come up and see me, make me smile. So this is the nub of my story, right?
Singing.
So I was at this section will be name drop city, right? I was at a birthday party for Johnny Walker, the Radio 2 DJ, right, at his house, and Johnny's partner Tiggy introduced me to Steve Harley, right? Who was quite a short guy, sort of like had a sort of angry looking face, which didn't get any less angry as our conversation proceeded, right? And I went, because I always just blurt out the first thing that comes into my head. I went, Steve Harley, oh my God, mate, that song, honestly, that is one of the soundtracks to my life.
It's not an unreasonable thing to say.
So he snarled, right? He looked at me and he said, "What song?" Right. And I knew immediately what he meant. He was referring to his vast oeuvre of great classic.
Yeah, what hits, about Sebastian? You know.
But the look he gave me was so kind of angry and pissed off, and I just thought, "Fuck you, mate." And
you know what fucking songs.
Well, so I said to him, "Why have you got others?" And he just turned on his heel and marched off, and that was
again. You raise a good point, because I noticed that every single obit had "Make Me Smile" in the intro, and it was quite a long way down before they got to the best album was the Human Menagerie. You know,
he would have hated his obits. He'd have been protesting, saying, "I've written dozens of big songs, had a huge #1 in Belgium once."
They all think they're Lennon and McCartney.
Have you ever had any sour experiences?
Yeah, I mean,
meeting heroes.
The one that springs to mind was obviously I'm a massive movie fan, as I think everyone who listens to this podcast has probably picked up by now. So in 2005, the third of the truly dreadful Star Wars prequels came out. Yeah. They were really bad.
Absolutely awful.
I mean, they are.
These are the ones with Jabba Blinks or whatever it was called.
Jar Jar Binks.
Jar Binks.
The racist alien. As I mean,
a precursor of so much
it was
come.
Absolutely extraordinarily bad. All three of them, and the third of this dreadful trio of movies was called Revenge of the Sith, which is where. Oh God, I can't even believe I'm saying this on a serious podcast. Where Anakin Skywalker, the Jedi, becomes Darth Vader, the man in the black suit. Okay, so anyway, I managed to secure an interview on the junket with George Lucas.
Oh,
and
wow.
They'd taken a whole floor of the Dorchester for the junket. I think a couple of the stars were there as well. But I was very excited because when I was none but a bairn, my dad had taken me on the first day of the first Star Wars, which was good, and so I was like, I'm going to see this, and I thought I'm going to get his signature so I can give it to my kids, which I did, and it's on there. They've still got it, so that's nice. However, it was like going into a hostage situation because the guy was sitting in the middle on his own in this huge Dorchester hotel room, and he was catatonic with exhaustion, because I think touring one of those big films, I don't know how they do it actually, having done a few junkets, and I'm sure you've done junkets.
Yeah.
It's how they keep their cool, I don't know, because
and there's repetition of,
and and a lot of it is just 5 top questions. Do you prefer biscuits or milk or what? It's just unbelievable. And he was fine, I suppose, but I thought he might die, and I might actually be the person who killed George Lucas, which, to be honest, given the way his fan base were responding at the time to his output, would not necessarily have made me, a villain. But he was sort of monosyllabic and probably heavily sedated, and it was agony. I only had about 10 minutes, but I was trying to. And I knew I had to go back and write 2,000 words about this bloody idiot. And he was saying, I'm a bit of a history buff, and I thought, go on, just say something, say anything, really. But that was
a disappointment.
Although I think it probably was the authentic George Lucas, because I don't think he's the world's most interesting man.
Well, I saw Jurgen Klopp interviewed by a Danish reporter at the weekend, having been knocked out in the last minute by Manchester United in the FA Cup. And this Danish reporter asked him a series of perfectly reasonable questions about where was the lack of intensity in the team. Where was the intensity in the extra time? And Klopp lost his head completely.
Really?
Really rude to him, and said, you're not asking, this is a dumb question, I haven't got the nerves for you, and marched off. And even Saint Jurgen, he snaps after being asked the same question. And you think, like, how awful it must be to be a creative person or any kind of person, but constantly put under that questioning and the same questions time after time after time. I think it's amazing that they don't just march off and smack
I mean there are some people who I think are authentically and genuinely unpleasant. So I remember at the very start of my journalistic career, I was a unpaid volunteer at a magazine called Index on Censorship, which I retain a great affection, and I was very lucky to work there. Actually, I learned a lot. But there was a conference that they were collaborating on about free speech and so on in Amsterdam, and I went along, as did most of the staff, and Pinter was doing the main keynote speech, Harold Pinter, and with his wife, Lady Antonia Fraser, in tow, and he did his speech about how awful America is and free speech is nice, and everyone clapped and it was all good. But then the organizer said, could you take them back to their hotel? Now, I was sort of used to the idea that or just assumed that people, I mean, I was just like nobody. I was, a complete nobody in the setup. That the deal was that when someone like that is your chaperone back to the hotel, you won't actually be actively nasty. I mean, that seemed to me to be a fair minimum to expect, right? She was charming, right?
Yeah.
Oh, have you come far? And all this. He was a a nightmare.
Really?
I mean, yes. I mean, it was like, is this the right way? I don't remember this canal at all, you know. Where did you say you were from? What are you doing? And I thought, mate, I'm, 22. I don't know anything about anything. You are Harold Pinter, top playwright, but you're being a complete wanker right now, right? I didn't say that. I've looked back. I did meet him subsequently, actually, and to his complete non-credit, by that stage I was editor of The Spectator, and he couldn't have been more charming. And I thought, I get it. I get it. You're one of those, are you? Right? Yeah. Mr. Left Wing.
I had an encounter with Phil Daniels,
Quadrophenia
and Parklife fame. And my boss at the time, I was working at the Mirror, and my boss took him out for dinner and to try to talk him into doing like a restaurant review column.
Oh, really?
And we went out.
You can take your restroom.
And I think, I don't know whether it's like sort of Cockneys that I've got a general problem with, but we hated each other at first sight.
Really?
Apparently, when I went off to the toilet after about 5 minutes, Daniel said to my boss, "Who is that? See you next Tuesday." Right?
Really?
Honestly, apropos nothing. And then in the taxi on the way back home, I remember getting dropped off in Clerkenwell, where I was living at the time. And him going, "Right, see you, scouse wanker." And I was trying to get back in the car to hit him. "You fucking mockney twat," absolutely descended into near Quadrophenia style violence.
It would appear that he wasn't really acting in Quadrophenia then. He was actually just being himself. Just be yourself, Steve.
I'm sure he's a lovely man in other circumstances, but I found him to be utterly
That
boorish.
is disappointing because he has been Quadrophenia is a great movie, but also Parklife, I think, has kind of baked him into British culture forever, and that's very disappointing to hear that he's like that, though not hugely surprising when I think about it.
Maybe it could easily somewhere he's telling the same story, but I'm the complete arsehole in the tale. I'm sure.
I somehow doubt it because, again, thinking back now, in the light of what you just said, to his film roles.
Yeah.
Like his, do you remember he was Ray Winston's sidekick in Scum?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Another not particularly pleasant.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things where he bridled me. He kept referring to Winston as, "I'll get the Winston to do this, and I'll get the Winston to do that," and come out on the restaurant reviews. And I was
That's not good, is it?
I was getting all a bit fed up with
the Winston.
The Mockney act,
No, well, I mean, what can I say? I mean, meet your heroes. Some of them are good, some of them are great. But...
I once had Melvyn Bragg, who I was a big admirer of, and I wanted him to write a piece at the Mirror. In I can't remember what it was about. It was something about the sense of Britishness.
Yes.
And I remember phoning his office and saying, "Would Lord Bragg write this piece?" and getting a very kind of swift, "No, thank you very much," for the Daily Mirror. From his PA. And then I emailed back saying, "Would it make any difference if Lord Bragg was to be made aware that I'm prepared to offer him the biggest single fee for an opinion piece the Daily Mirror's ever paid? And he may like to know that the previous record is held by Norman Mailer." Right. So within 2 minutes,
before
PA was back on the phone. Lord Bragg, I've spoken to Lord Bragg, and he took the Daily Mirror as a child. Nothing would please him more than to write. And of course, I'd given him this great dinner table story that he'd trumped Norman Mailer in, and Norman Mailer's never written for the Daily Mirror. It was absolutely
a great
bollocks.
Line, though.
But we got Lord Bragg.
You selected well.
On the back of it, I went out for lunch with him to the Ivy, and he was the most charming man I've ever had lunch with, I think. I mean, a slight vanity to him, but he was absolutely beautiful person.
I mean, the most impressed I've ever been in given the context was by not long. I mean, in the first years after the Fatwa, I got an interview with Salman Rushdie, and when I was at the Times, and
after the Fatwa, did you say?
Yeah. He was in hiding.
Wow.
So I had to undertake all sorts of for weeks advance. Special branch called me up, and we were going to meet in this place and then go off to a place unknown, and it was. I remember meeting the special branch guy who was fabulous. He was fabulously Sweeney in a Ford Cortina up in Archway, and he then did 19 U-turns, back and I was trying desperately to hold on for dear life, and it really was like we were, which indeed, wow. I mean, there were assassination squads around, so it wasn't totally. But we got finally to a safe house somewhere in North London where there was Salman Rushdie and 9 special branch people. And you just thought, my God, this is not a happy way to live. Yeah. And he couldn't have been more charming. Yeah. I mean, he was receptive and, aware that it was, almost sort of more solicitous about how weird I might be feeling, which seemed to me pretty far down the list of priorities. But he was magnificent.
Is he back up and running after that terrible attack he suffered?
He's got a memoir coming out.
Oh, good.
In April called Knife.
Wow.
And I don't know what the plans are for his, whether he's doing much publicity for it, but I gather it's people I'm looking forward to reading it, but I'm told by people who have read it that it's about the attack and the aftermath and how it made him feel. And apparently it's really quite something.
All right. Well, we went from Cockney Rebel to Salman Rushdie.
Not bad.
Brilliant. Hope you guys enjoyed that little insight into a celebrity world.
Yeah, behind the curtain.
Great chum.
Through the keyhole of the 2 Matts.
All right. Love to hear your stories. If you've met your heroes and they've let you down horrifically, then do emails. And any questions, any feedback, the usual email address, which is 2Matts, that's the number 2, MATTS, at tnepublishing.com. 2Matts at tnepublishing.com. Or if you listen on Spotify, you can message us there. And that's what Susie Seller did, who says, on the Kate Middleton photo thing, they might not be able to release the original photo because they overwrote the original file with the edited version. That's quite possible, I suppose, isn't it? Why wouldn't they just say that, though?
Yes, exactly.
Wouldn't you just say, well...
We'd love to, but we can't.
Yeah, because it doesn't exist anymore, because Kate has messed up the bloody file.
She was only meant to blow the bloody arms off.
Good to see her up and about the other day. Not that I care that much, but...
Although apparently it's not her. And
it wasn't her.
It was taken on Mars, and it's actually Tupac.
We are back with a new question and answer episode on Sunday. And do remember our subscription offer. If you like this podcast, then you will love The New European. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2Matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. And there's a link in the show notes. Thanks as ever to our producer, Matt Hill, at Rethink Audio, with support from Ollie Peart. And until next week...
It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.